Hey! So I've had the chance to play with the Cooler Master Master Keys MK750 mechanical keyboard for a little while now, and feel like I'm finally ready to give you all my thoughts on it. Now the MK750 did come out late last year, and since then Cooler Master have announced both the MK850 and MK851. However, because the MK750 does seem to feature a fairly different design to those, I thought it was still worth me taking a look at. I have to say that when I first got this keyboard out of the box, I was really surprised just how fancy it looks compared to how it does in photos and videos. Like, in person, it just looks really high quality. As whilst the base is plastic, it does have this top plate of aluminium, which does give the keyboard a lot of kind of rigidity and sturdiness that I really didn't expect from the product photos. Something else actually that I really didn't expect from the product photos is this keyboard's combination of different colours and materials. Like, while the aluminium top plate is anodised gunmetal grey, the kind of plastic base is black, and then we've got this acrylic front trim which has a kind of tinted, almost kind of mirrored effect. And I really wouldn't have thought these different kind of looks would have combined together so seamlessly, but strangely they do, and the keyboard looks really good for it. I have to say though, I'm really not sure on Cooler Master's decision to use this sort of plastic on a product that's designed to be handled. I feel like it won't stay looking very pretty for very long. So the MK750 is a full-size keyboard, mine having the ISO layout, me being from the UK. Unfortunately, it's not available in any smaller form factors, which I think is a huge shame, as 10 keyless is my preferred form factor, but I know there are a lot of people that prefer a 100% keyboard. So the MK750 is available with one of 3 different switch options, either Cherry Max red, blue or brown switches. Now, I can completely understand Cooler Master's decision not to opt to offer, a version of this keyboard with heavier switches, for example, Cherry Max black switches, as I feel like they don't really have as much mass market appeal, especially with gamers. Something that I would love to see though in the future is maybe a version with like Cherry Max Silent Red or Speed Silver versions. But yeah, so I've got Cherry Max brown switches here, as that's been my favourite switch colour for a while now. So the switches are mounted to the aluminium top plate, giving you kind of like a floating keycap design, which, because the front of the top plate doesn't kind of curve up like you see on the design of some keyboards, a lot of the switch is exposed, which is a look that I'm really not sure if I like it. Like, when I first got the keyboard, I really loved the look of it, and I thought it was just, really nice. But then after a while, I started to feel like the switches were just a little too exposed for my liking. But now I'm starting to like it again. Like, it's starting to grow on me. So I'm not really sure, if I like it or not. But at the end of the day, if you're looking into seeing whether this keyboard is right for you or not, then it's what you think about it, not me. So the longer keys actually use Cherry stabilizers alongside the Cherry switches, which makes it very easy to remove the keycaps with the included keycap puller. So something that I actually really love that Cooler Master have opted to do is go for the standard layout across the bottom row of keys. It means that finding replacement keycap sets is going to be so easy, so I really love that Cooler Master have done this. So with the stock keycaps, the legends are laser engraved, and as you can see the font is really kind of professional looking, which I think really suits the minimalistic kind of design of this keyboard. Now, in terms of the material of the stock keycaps, it's ABS plastic, which is pretty much the baseline standard for what you expect to see from a mainstream mechanical keyboard like this, which, isn't really a bad thing, it's just nothing special either. Now, whilst I have seen keyboards in the past with higher quality ABS keycaps than this, what I'd actually love to see Cooler Master do is move away from ABS completely and instead use double shot PBT keycaps, which is incidentally actually what the included 9 purple accent keys are made of, which just look so nice. Like, let me just quickly get them on the keyboard for you to see. These keycaps really are just so nice, and they look amazing in comparison to the stock keycaps. The problem though is that whilst I absolutely praise Cooler Master for including such gorgeous keycaps, because they are just, so amazing in comparison to the stock keycaps, in my opinion it highlights one of the biggest weaknesses of this board. Now, obviously a full set of double shot PBT keycaps of stock would have increased the manufacturing cost of the MK750, and therefore, likely also the retail cost. But I do think it's worth mentioning that I have seen competing RGB Cherry MX keyboards that have managed to provide a full set of PBT keycaps at, a pretty similar price point, which, whilst I can't really make any like definitive comparisons without getting one of those keyboards in to take a closer look at, I do just think that's kind of worth, mentioning for you to look into if high quality keycaps are important to you. So if it's not the keycaps that make the Cooler Master MK750 worthy of consideration, what is? Well, for one, I think the wrist rest. This is by far the nicest wrist rest that I've ever seen in person. It's magnetic, so it doesn't have the little kind of clips that are prone to snapping, and it's also really comfortable. It uses soft PU leather. It also has 6 rubber pads for grip. The magnets are strong enough that it's not going anywhere in kind of day-to-day use, but also weak enough that you can have a gap between the wrist rest and the keyboard if you want, for kind of like additional ergonomic options. So before I get the keyboard plugged in to show you the lighting and macro options, I thought that I should probably first show you the bottom of it, which, as you can see, pretty much features your standard affair with some cable routing channels. We've got 3 here, some rubber pads at the front for grip, and then some feet. Which you'd think this is rubber, but it's actually more of kind of like a rubberized plastic material, which you think would probably be less grippy, but in practice is actually just as grippy. In regards to the stands, these actually change the angle and the height of the keyboard so significantly that I do worry it may be too steep for some people, but I can't really personally say, as I always use my keyboards flat. Another decision that I really love that Cooler Master have made is to opt to go for a USB-C port and then also provide you with this really nice black braided USB-C to USB-A cable. I know that a lot of you will be really upset that the keyboard doesn't come with USB pass-through, but I honestly don't want or need it on a keyboard. Like, I know it's a really unpopular opinion, but I'd much rather have a really kind of like simple and elegant cable managing solution like this than just like a really thick chunky cable with USB pass-through. So I do really love that Cooler Master have done this. So now that I'm at the point in the video of plugging in the keyboard, I can finally talk to you about the lighting and macro control, which can be customised either on the fly or in the software. Now, I did initially run into some issues with the firmware and software, but after a lot of emails back and forth with Cooler Master, they were able to work through the problems and get them fixed. Initially, I was of course disappointed that I was running into these issues, but in the end I was actually left impressed by just how quickly they were able to respond, and it became very clear that Cooler Master are still very much actively working to improve things. It took some time, but in the end most of the issues were fixed with a new version of firmware and software, which should hopefully be rolled out by the time you watch this video. So yeah, the MK750 uses a 32-bit ARM Cortex-M3 processor, and both your lighting and macro settings are saved onto the 512 kilobytes of onboard memory, which means that you can keep all your lighting and macro customizations when moving from system to system. Each of the keys are individually backlit, the switches having a transparent housing to let the light through, so the usual method for mechanical keyboard Rgb lighting. Now that the media keys are lit up and you're able to see what they do, as they have no visible legends when the backlighting's off, I have to say that I really wish the track skip keys had been volume up and volume down keys instead, rather than the volume keys being assigned to FN plus page up and page down, as these are keyboard functions that I use all of the time. But I suppose this is something that comes down to personal preference. One thing I think we can all agree on though is that it's a real shame that these aren't 4 proper RGB Cherry MX switches, as the space is here. Something that the MK750 has in addition to the switch lighting is edge lighting, which consists of 26 individual LEDs, the colour of which either being pre-programmed by the lighting mode you're in or individually customisable in the software. The edge lighting isn't as bright as the switch lighting, but that's what Cooler Master had intended, for it to be kind of a more subtle effect rather than desk illuminating. Now, whilst I do love the idea of my keyboard having edge lighting, there's 2 complaints that I have about its implementation here that make me wish I could have it turned off permanently, which isn't always possible depending on what lighting mode you're in. Firstly, the brightness is a little inconsistent and patchy, and secondly, whilst this minimalistic Cooler Master logo looks really nice from straight on, from any other angle it kind of distorts and changes as you move around, which is really quite distracting. So I guess I should quickly run you through the basics of the MK750's on-the-fly lighting customization. So there are 5 different profiles you can switch between by pressing FN and either escape P1, P2, P3 or P4. and you can customise the lighting and macros differently from profile to profile. Although with the escape profile, you can neither assign macros to it nor see it in the software. However, you are able to still customise its lighting on the fly. So once you've chosen the profile that you want to be in, you've got 11 different LED modes that you can cycle through by pressing Fn and F5, one of those being that all of the keyboard's LEDs are completely off. Most of these modes are customisable in some way or another, although there are even more modes that are able to be activated in the software. Originally there was a snake mode, which was a fun surprise, as it's the first time that I've owned a keyboard that came with an inbuilt game. However, unfortunately I noticed that occasionally the snake's food would appear outside of the area that the snake was able to travel to, which, was essentially a game-breaking bug. So I fed that back to Cooler Master, and unfortunately it resulted in the snake mode being removed from the latest version of the firmware, but don't worry, I've been assured that they are working to have snake return in future updates. To customise the colour in an applicable mode, simply hold Fn and toggle through F2, F3 and F4, which toggle through red, green and blue respectively. Each of these keys having 10 different brightness steps, completely off, and then 9 different brightness levels, which should give you a total of 999 different colour combinations to choose from on the fly, if my math is correct. Using the software, however, you should still have the full 16.7 million colours to choose from. One downside to this approach though is that because you're controlling the red, green and blue LED brightness levels individually, there's no overall keyboard brightness override, meaning that depending on what lighting mode you're in, it can be a very lengthy process to turn the keyboard's brightness down whilst retaining your current lighting setup. Fn plus F1 allows you to cycle through 8 different preset colours. Unfortunately though, you're not able to change the colour of the presets, which I personally think is a shame, as if, for example, with the pink, you wanted it to have less blue, you couldn't save it like that for quicker access later. Although, I do think this is meant for people who don't really care about having a particular colour shade and just want quicker access to the basic colours. That being said, annoyingly white isn't a preset that can just be cycled to, so if I now wanted the LEDs white again, I'd have to make them white myself. On the subject of white light, this is something that Rgb LEDs normally have difficulty doing, and unfortunately the MK750 is no different. There's a slight purple tint to it, with the media keys and front Cooler Master logo being particularly lilac. This isn't surprising, but it's just something to bear in mind. So customising the custom mode is a little different than the other modes, as you first have to enter a recording state to do so, by pressing Fn and F10. Then, just like with the other modes, you can either toggle through Fn plus F2, F3 and F4, or cycle through Fn plus F1. And you can see what colour you're going to be painting with, so to speak, by the Fn key's LED. I have to say it really is so satisfying to just kind of like paint with RGB light on the fly like this, and it really is very fun to fiddle with too. It's just so nice to have this kind of like tactile experience compared to just, like a software only approach. Things to note though, is you can customise the media keys on the fly, which is good, but I can't seem to assign a colour to the Fn key. Also, you obviously can't assign lighting to the edge lights, which means that to completely customise this keyboard, you do have to use the software. But once you are done customising the custom mode, you can save your changes by hitting Fn plus the profile you're in. Another thing to note though is that it does seem to autosave except for your very last apply colour, meaning that you can't just have a play with the mode for fun with the intention of letting the recording state time out and it revert back if you don't like the changes that you made. Fn plus F6 or F7 lets you switch between being able to customise the foreground or background colour of the 5 different reactive and scattered lighting effects. I really love having this available, as I just think it's a lot prettier having a colour for the backlight to default to, rather than just turning off, like you see with the traditional reactive lighting effects. You're also able to control the speed of all of the effects, except from of course the static ones, by pressing either Fn and up or Fn and down. You're also able to change the direction of the rainbow wave mode by pressing either Fn and left or Fn and right. I did try this with the different modes to see if you could change the direction of the ripples in the ripple effect, for example, and nope, they always seem to go in the same direction. So this customization option seems to be solely for the rainbow wave mode. Whilst I am on the subject of the rainbow wave mode, I should say that it does have some issues with the on-the-fly colour control, which unfortunately hasn't been fixed with the new firmware update. Whilst in the software you can play with the levels of RGB in the wave and the keyboard understands and displays them correctly, when changing the colours on the fly the keyboard can get very confused with what colour it's meant to be displaying, especially with red, as it usually ends up displaying a kind of like pinky colour even with red set to its brightest. which is probably a good time to mention that you can completely reset to default either the profile that you're in by holding Fn plus R, or all the profiles by holding Fn plus E. I should note that this resets the macros too. And then finally, with the on-the-fly lighting, Fn plus F8 puts your keyboard into a kind of showroom/display mode. With the on-the-fly macros, you have 4 different macro profiles. Again, P1, P2, P3 or P4. Once in your desired profile, simply hit Fn plus F11 to enter a macro recording mode. You can assign a macro to every key apart from Fn, indicated by the fact that all of the keys apart from Fn's LEDs are blue. So to assign a macro, simply choose the key you want to assign the macro to, type out the macro, and then hold either Fn, print screen, scroll lock or pause. Print screen if you want the macro to play out once, regardless of whether you press or hold down the button. Scroll lock if you want the macro to play out indefinitely, regardless of what other keys you press, until you press the macro key again. Or pause if you only want the macro to play out whilst you're holding the key down. And you can see what keys have already had macros assigned to them by their LEDs changing to red. And to exit the recording mode, simply hold Fn and escape to save and exit. It's just as easy to delete macros, simply hold Fn and F12 to enter a kind of delete mode. You can see obviously which ones you've assigned macros to by the LEDs being red. Simply press it and then save with Fn plus escape. Or just like before, you can once again hold down either Fn plus R or Fn plus E. Whilst the macro customization process is very simple, I do think that the on-the-fly functionality is quite limited, especially as there's no on-the-fly delay control, so if you enter the macro slowly, you'll end up with a slow macro. Although I don't really know what they could have done to work around this. However, you are able to customize or remove delays when recording macros in the software. You're also able to remap the different profile keys in the software, which means I'm able to move volume up and volume down across the track skip keys just like I wanted. Although now it is even more of a pain that these aren't proper switches that I could put custom keycaps on. Something fun with the macros is that you can see them play out on the keyboard when you activate them. In regards to the software's lighting control, you can tell straight away that Cooler Master have kept things very simple. There's no advanced difficulty option like you see with other keyboard software. It really is just a quick way to make large customization changes. There are a few extra things that it does though, like giving you access to the full red, green and blue brightness level spectrum, plus allowing you to customise the edge lighting in the custom mode. Although, something to note here is that the picture's side lighting doesn't reflect exactly where the side lights sit on the actual keyboard, which can lead to your customisations not quite lining up the same way that they do on screen. We also have 4 new LED modes to play with: multi-layer, multi-zone, equaliser and CPU load. Multi-layer is a fun little mode to play with that allows you to make any of the effects reactive, which is cool. Multi-zone is great for allowing you to control whether you have the edge lighting on or off, regardless of what effect is playing across the rest of the keyboard, which does kind of negate one of my previous complaints that you lose control of the edge lighting in certain modes. As with this, you essentially can recreate any of the modes, just with added edge lighting control. The only negative thing that I would say about the multi-zone mode is that I really wish it had per key backlight control and the ability to apply the same effect more than once, as those two things would make it just more of a more flamboyant version of the custom mode. Well, that, plus the fact that if you close and reopen the software, it completely forgets how you had either the multi-zone or multi-layer mode set up, which can be really quite irritating. So with the CPU load and equaliser modes, these work by using a background process that monitors your system. According to the task manager, these modes utilise around 1% of my i7-6900K. However, when I'm not using either of these lighting modes, the background process is either not running at all or idles at 0% load, so there's no complaints here from me. Giving my overall opinions on the software, I do wish it was a little more advanced, as even though Cooler Master aren't marketing this keyboard as having complex lighting software, I think it may be just too simplistic, even for just basic lighting control, as there are a few things you'd expect for it to be able to do that you can't. Like, for example, there isn't even a way to be able to reselect a colour that you've used before. You have to manually copy the codes across. So if you're looking for a keyboard with a really advanced lighting control, then the MK750 isn't the right keyboard for you, as you don't have the ability to create your own lighting modes from scratch, or make timed lighting animations, etc. In fact, I can't even get the MK750 to do things that my long since dead Alienware laptop from 2012 could do. So with that being said, I would advise you look into the other RGB keyboards on the market. The only other one that I've used is my original Corsair Gaming K70, and its software offers significantly more comprehensive features for lighting control. Although it is worth mentioning that there is an SDK for the MK750. Now, I used to think of myself as in this category, as I initially demand a lot from an RGB product, wanting, like unlimited control to be able to come up with all kinds of crazy lighting effects, and getting frustrated when there's something that I can't do. But what I've actually found is that after a while, the novelty does wear off for me, and I just kind of settle into a more kind of like simple lighting profile that, complements the rest of my setup and isn't too distracting. So from that end, I found that in practice, the limitations that the software has have actually hardly impacted me at all. And on that front, the Cooler Master software does everything I need it to do. In fact, if you are a more casual user who just wants, easy to use RGB lighting that works well, for example, like if your keyboard is currently blue and you'd like the option to be able to change it to red, etc., then you won't even need the software at all. You can simply make changes using on-the-fly keys. You even have, the built-in flashy effects when you want your keyboard to do something cool. So if you are someone who only really needs that basic control, then I think that the MK750 could be an excellent keyboard for you to consider, as that's something that the MK750's on-the-fly first approach to lighting really excels at. And I think you'll find its on-the-fly first control is a huge benefit over software first keyboards like the K70, which doesn't even offer any on-the-fly lighting customization at all. Well, I say that the MK750 is an on-the-fly fast keyboard, as from both using the software plus talking to Cooler Master, it is very clear that the software has been designed to just be something that, you open every now and again when you want to make a major change, and then just utilise the on-the-fly controls for more frequent adjustments. You're not even meant to keep the software open on your PC, as if you do, it actually messes up the on-the-fly controls. And yet, my personal feelings on the lighting is that whilst I do prefer using the on-the-fly keys compared to software, I find myself automatically reaching for the software for any changes that I want to make. This unfortunately coming down to two issues that I have with the on-the-fly controls, the light bars and the FN key. This is an example of a quick two-tone colour scheme made in the software, and here's my attempt to replicate it on the fly. The light bars I can forgive, but the FN key is a major annoyance, and in my opinion, if you have to open the software to complete the theme anyway, then you might as well have used the software from the start. And as a result, I can't help question the MK750's headline feature, which is no software required. Because for me, and how I personally use it, the software is definitely a requirement, which unfortunately causes me to circle back and wondering if I can still recommend the MK750 to people who only want basic lighting control, which was causing me to have some issues with writing this video, which you may have seen if you follow me on Twitter. So at the end of the day, I really do think it's just kind of up to you to decide whether the on-the-fly controls are too restrictive for you or not. What I'd really love to see in the future though, is a keyboard that utilises both the on-the-fly controls of the MK750 with the more advanced lighting software that you see from Corsair keyboards, for example, as I think that'd be the ultimate solution for everyone. So the final thing that I wanted to touch on with this review is my thoughts on how it actually feels to use the MK750. Arguably, this is the most important thing when it comes to a keyboard, but as it's something that's so subjective and dependent on your personal preferences, I thought I should save it to last. So out of all the keyboards that I've had the chance to play with so far, my favourite in terms of how it feels to use is my Vortex Poker 3 with Cherry Mix Brown switches. Trying to compare the feeling of typing on this versus the MK750, well, it's hard to, as they really are just so many leagues apart. The Poker 3 feels like you're using just like a proper piece of equipment, whilst in comparison, the MK750 just feels like a toy. But that was an unfair comparison, as the Poker 3 uses PBT keycaps rather than ABS. So to see how much of a difference the PBT keycaps were making, I decided to move them across to the MK750, and the difference was just huge. PBT keycaps on the MK750 make for a gargantuan improvement over the MK750 with its stock ABS keycaps installed. In fact, the PPT keycaps really made such a difference that the Poker was only barely able to keep its lead thanks to its aluminium base, giving the Cherry MX switches kind of a bit more of like a thump when bottoming out, which really is high praise for the MK750 given that it has a plastic base. So we see the ABS keycaps being once again highlighted as one of, if not, this keyboard's biggest weakness. But I really don't think it's fair to single out Cooler Master for this, when, you know, pretty much all of the other mainstream mechanical keyboard manufacturers use bad ABS keycaps on par with these, which is something that I'd really love to see change, as it sucks not getting premium keycaps with keyboards that have premium prices. I do think it says a lot about this keyboard though, that what in my opinion is its biggest weakness is something that's shared by pretty much every other mainstream mechanical keyboard out there. So with that in mind, assuming that you do like the implementation of the lighting, as the only other weaknesses I say that it has are the media keys, the, you know, less than spectacular edge lighting and the occasional bug, I have absolutely no problem recommending this keyboard to you, especially if you can find it discounted. Like right now it's available for £110 in the UK, which is significantly cheaper than the competing mainstream keyboards. Whilst I would still recommend it as something for you to consider at its full £150 RRP, it's a much tougher sell, and I definitely recommend doing some research and seeing if any of the other keyboards on the market are better suited for your specific preferences and needs. Although to be fair, I'd recommend doing that anyway when, you know, making any purchasing decision. So yeah, that was my review of the Cooler Master Master Keys MK750 mechanical keyboard. I'd love to know what you think of it in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you haven't already and you want to see more of my videos, please don't forget to subscribe, or maybe even consider becoming a Patreon. Thank you for watching.